we have been going through themes, which I just started this week and have been talking about for a little while. It took me some time to kind of get my brain wrapped around some concepts that would be helpful. And I want it to be structured enough to give you simple step-by-step little bits that we can learn and then also implement in our lives. And so we are here to cultivate our lives, and I wanted to offer content that is free for you. It also gives me an opportunity to test it out and see if I could explore this more thoroughly in paid content in the future. You get the benefit of having it free for now, and I get the benefit of learning from you and finding out what resonates and what's helpful, and formulating something that could be offered as a course later down the road or through group coaching options, which is something that I'm considering as well. Okay, so if you're here, by the way, let me know. Put something in the comments that says, hey, I'm here. I just want to know that you're here visiting the group and just listening to the content. And anytime something resonates with you, let me know via the comments. That would be fantastic. This particular video is not shareable. The content that I create on the page is shareable, but in this group it is just for you guys. Unless the teaching, if it's really helpful and just clear and concise, I might either edit it or make sure that it's something that I can upload to YouTube for people who don't get on Facebook. I do have several members of the community, my email subscribers, who are not on Facebook. So I try to keep that in mind as well, because not everybody wants to be here in the group. And that's fine. I want to make sure that you have the content. Okay, so let's talk about Name It to Tame It. Earlier this week, on Monday, I posted a video from Dan Siegel. It was a short video. There are other ones that are out there. I believe there's an entire TEDx talk. I haven't listened to the whole one. This particular video was actually the one that was linked for the class that I'm in, and I thought it was super helpful for this group because it was short and it highlighted some of the basic principles. Because as believers, a lot of us may struggle with the whole concept of emotions and what are healthy emotions, positive emotions, and sometimes we think all negative emotions are unhealthy, which is not true. Understanding that our emotions are simply a response to internal states and mindsets, then we can be freed up to recognize that emotions are telling us a story. They're telling us helpful information. They are not the be-all, end-all, but as believers, we can't be afraid of fear. We can't be afraid of having or feeling negative emotions. And I say can't if we want to experience a cultivated life and a life that experiences more of God and the life that He's given us. When we shut down our emotions, we shut out God's work in us. He is an emotional God. He has created us with emotions to not only to inform us, but also to be able to have connections with other people. One of the interesting things about the video that Dan Siegel did is when he talked about what happens in the brain. So he gives them an example of the limbic system in this lower part of the brain, and then the thinking part of the brain that's at the top. And this is the more, you have your left and right hemispheres, but processing the information. And then when you're triggered, people say, flip the lid. This is how my therapist showed me. Like, it's literally like your brain gets flipped because you're triggered in the amygdala and the limbic system. The fear that you're experiencing, it is triggering so much things that are happening in your brain. It's designed to shut down parts of your body and stimulate other parts of your body to keep you safe. What happens is when we're past an initial trigger or something that is unsafe, then we can continue to feel unsafe even though those triggers aren't around us anymore. And beliefs get wired in, I believe beliefs get wired in instances, and it keeps us more in this state than is healthy. And so one of the things that I brought up earlier this week is that we can experience long-term effects of unhealed trauma and stressful incidences. So trauma is not all just big T traumas, it's smaller events too that aren't, that have changed us in some way, that we didn't have the capacity to fully process and metabolize even in our bodies and our minds and our spirits, and it starts to build up. And so there are people, and like for me, for example, when I came back from the ranch and fostering, when I was in the PTSD state of body, I literally felt like the nerves were going to jump out of my body all the time. I was in a very heightened state. And so what we need to do is to start off with a way to calm the body so that you can go back to some logical processing. For example, one of the things that you'll hear in Christian circles is about renewing your mind and replacing lies with truth and that type of thing. And those are helpful concepts. And I mean, definitely the scripture talks about renewing your mind, but we sometimes think of it in a limited way, that it's merely the replacement of words, when it actually is more of a replacement of a full experience with God that happens at a deeper level. So if the words just stay as words, it stays, like, I just think of it like kind of going right through the brain. It's words. It has impact, but it doesn't transform everything on the inside. I don't know if that's making sense. I'm probably losing track here, but going back to Dan Siegel's video, and what he talks about first is connect, then redirect. And so that's a therapist guide, but it's also something we can do, something you can do with your friends. And you probably want other people to do for you. And you might have to tell them specifically, this is what I need right now. Can you try to provide it? They may not be perfect at it, but sometimes we just need to be clear and upfront. Connect, then redirect. Connect, then redirect. So what does that look like in a therapist situation or in a healthy friendship situation? It's part of the attunement, which I'm going to talk about more next week. But connecting first to that person's experience, validating their experience, and connecting with, you know, when you're triggered, you're talking about all these things. For me, I was like, blah, 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 blah. It was like all these things were happening when I would either in my mind or as I was writing something out. I couldn't get the words out that much, but once I did, then I was still just blah. It was all coming out, and it was just a hodgepodge of things. I was also overstimulated in the body. And one of the interesting things that happened when I went to therapy repeatedly, I had different therapists, but they would ask questions like, where do you feel that in your body right now? And I thought, when is the advice coming? I just need the advice. Tell me what to do next. And I think a lot of us might approach counseling that way. But when you have a quality therapist, giving some information is a piece of their job. It's a piece, calling to action. There's so much else that's happening that you may not know what's happening, and you probably don't need to know, but it's helping you grow over time and build safety and calm neural pathways, calm the body down, that type of thing, and connect to basically be able to connect to the parts of the brain that can take some action steps. Because if you're operating out of here, you can't use this part of the brain anyway. So that question that they would ask me is, where are you feeling it? And what was happening is they were basically helping me kind of get more present in the moment and connected to my body and what was happening. And I asked myself that several times. And sometimes I want an answer. Why do I feel like I'm being pushed from behind? Why do I feel this constriction upon me everywhere? Why do I feel heaviness in certain parts of my body? But it wasn't about getting an answer. It's about noticing. And that's something I talk a lot about, especially with Unleash sheets and using the solitude time or the feelings and the thoughts, is noticing, being intentional and noticing what's going on. Okay. One of the other principles that they would talk to me about or help me out of my extreme states was different grounding techniques. And I've talked about that in an article, I think it was on I Believe, for dealing with anxiety. And if you go to the free download section, email subscribers have access to the free resources on my website. And there is a printable there with, I believe I have a printable there for the 5 steps of kind of working through anxiety. These are more practical steps initially, grounding type of techniques and things that can help your brain calm down. And so I'm going to talk about Dan's thing here in just a second, but one of the grounding techniques is noticing just with your senses. Like I spy 5 things in the room with the color blue or the color green, whatever. You look for things like that, or planting your feet in the ground and noticing things that you hear or that you smell. Just it's awakening the senses and basically bringing it back to what's happening within your body. Now, I don't know the specifics brain-wise that happen with these techniques, but I imagine that's pretty similar to what Dan Siegel was talking about with Name It to Tame It. So what he said was that after he connected as a therapist, for example, in a situation with whatever this person was frustrated with, being rejected by someone, and then he was helping them put some words to their experience and saying, I wonder if you feel fearful right now. That's one thing that some therapists might do. Some might say it a different way, or just, I can understand that would be a very scary situation to experience, right? And that, wow, how scary. Something that, scary is probably not the best word, but other words that identify some of the feelings, like feeling judged, feeling rejected, feeling sad. And when we do that for ourselves, we can't do it in the intense state. So that's one reason it's helpful to have the safe friends and let them know up front, I need connection, and then maybe some guidance or whatever, or just some words of encouragement or something that's helpful for you. But in the process for ourselves is going back and recognizing, okay, I'm experiencing, this is why I put those 3 different phases of questions that you could ask yourself. It could be just a simple, quick thing. I'm feeling anxious right now. I feel anxious. And feeling anxious, you don't have to have any answers. It doesn't mean that you're stuck there, but just simply noticing it. And by saying those words and identifying and noticing what's happening, Siegel talks about neurotransmitters that are actually happening in the brain from the top part going down to soothe this overactive, extremely agitated state that's happening in the amygdala when fear and anxiety is either present immediately or long-term situations where so many things have built up. I believe that's something that we're experiencing right now, kind of as this collective trauma as a community, that there's constantly all this news. And that's one reason that there's advice to only take in so much news. You've got to limit that, because you may not even be aware of how much it is triggering inside of you, the states of fear and anxiety, and that things that are out of your control. And those heightened states can weaken your immune system. They can keep you from being able to respond well to other people in your the close networks that we have right now. And goodness knows we need some help in being able to stay calm and be able to respond in healthy ways, not more agitated, right? So name your feelings. And in the last post, yesterday's post, I think it was in yesterday, where maybe it's going to go live today. I don't even know. But it has some specifics about what we can say. So I am experiencing this right now. I'm feeling anxiety, or I recently experienced this, and then these thoughts are something that I thought, and then the feelings that I had. That's naming 3 different things. Name the feeling, that's one thing. Name the experience, whichever. That's one simple level that you can do. For example, let's say I go to one of my children and we have an intense conversation and I'm frustrated, and I start walking away and just acknowledging, I am feeling frustrated right now. I feel frustrated. I feel worked up. I feel angry. By doing that, I'm also noticing that something's happening inside of me, and maybe it'll give me, especially with practice, an opportunity to step back and say, okay, if I'm feeling that way, it's probably best if I don't respond right now. And so maybe I can do something that's more logical once your brain has calmed down a little bit and say, I need to step away. I can come back to you and talk to you in a few minutes, but right now I'm feeling a lot of intense emotions. And that can be with our children, with our spouse, with our friends, whomever. Especially we need that in these close quarters and times of close quarters with limited number of people. Okay, so the Unleash Sheets, again, is something that I keep coming back to, and it's not something that I had any idea going in that there was going to be scientific as well as spiritual backing behind it, I guess. But when Dan Siegel talks about naming entertainment, sometimes we don't have the words, or we just don't take the time to be really intentional about putting those words out there, or we have a fear of admitting what's happening inside of us. God already knows. When we admit it, when we bring it into awareness, we have an opportunity to deal with it and help it metabolize and get outside of us. So what happens when we're not working on those things? Not only does it go underground, but literally the small traumas can build up in our brains, and our bodies are designed, like through sleep and other processes, through exercise and those types of things, to literally metabolize and process the heightened things that happen to us during the day or days. And when you have a series of them happening over and over again and you never attend to it, it can get really stuck. And then you can live in this state that is persistent. So it is really important to take the time to do that. I recommend using Unleash Sheets weekly, building it into your schedule at least once a week. I know that it can take a long time, but it doesn't have to either. Once you know how to use it, then you can just use that format as your structure, something to give you some kind of a form and structure and say, okay, I'm going to focus on this. Here's the prompts. I don't have to think about it. I don't have to try to remember what they are. They're all right there. And then when you have an opportunity to put the feeling words down on there, you have 2 pages of words, 2 pages to give you something to hold on to. What are those emotions? Something to describe it with it. And again, it's that structure. And our brains crave some structure. So I've provided it for you with that tool. And I will try to give prompts specifically this week that may help you go a little bit deeper, specifically with regards to naming it, to taming it. And I'm going to try to do that every week with each teaching that I go through, that I want to be able to also provide prompts for those who are using the tool. It's totally optional. It's up to you if you want to purchase it and use it. But for those who have purchased it, I want to give you additional support and guidance so that you get a lot out of it, that you're able to benefit from it regularly. Okay, the last thing that I wanted to talk about is going back to what I said a little bit ago about the collective trauma. These are words that I come up with. They may be actual terms. I don't know. But I believe that there are 2 things that we can experience with regards to smaller traumas, not the big, huge events, but the smaller traumas that we don't necessarily notice or attend to. And that is collective interpersonal trauma and collective communal trauma. So this is how I would describe it. Collective interpersonal trauma would be some things that happen within inside of us that we have not resolved. And that could be a series of events. It could even be you are really working on trying to use your voice and say no, and then somebody usurps your authority and they demand something and you feel afraid, and something in there gets triggered, and then beliefs get wired in. I can't ever do this, and it becomes a traumatic thing because it is actually changing your ability to operate in a healthy way in the future. And a series of those events would be collective interpersonal traumas. And we may not know that they're there, but then suddenly something happens and it seems like such a small trigger to other people. And maybe it even seems like a small trigger to us. But for us, it's an escalated thing because of collective interpersonal trauma. Inside of us, it all connects together. Collective communal trauma was what I would describe what we're going through right now. And that is, as a community, as a world, we're experiencing this collective fear. All the questions around the virus, all the differences of opinion and the different beliefs that are out there, the different approaches that are out there, and then trying to decide for ourselves, how are we going to handle this? How are we going to proceed in the future? And that is, it has changed our lives. And it is important that we tend to what is happening, because I believe that these are things that can be building up and cause us problems down the road as well if we don't spend any time dealing with what's happening, at least processing with friends or processing through Unleash Sheets or sharing some of your experience in a video group. And by the way, a few weeks ago, I did a video chat for us just to kind of talk about things and just to engage as a community. If you want to do that, let me know and I'll set another one up. As long as it's something that's helpful and people want, I'm happy to go ahead and do that. But I guess my encouragement today is that you are so precious. You are so loved. And the reality is most of us never experience the fullness. I would say all of us never experience the fullness of how much we are loved. And I don't want any of us to shove aside opportunities to experience more of God's love, because that experience changes everything. When God says that love casts out fear, it is experiencing and internalizing God's love that makes a difference in our ability to respond to things in this world. Doesn't mean we never experience fear, that type of thing, but to live out of a sense of being run by fear. That's a whole other topic. I don't want to go too deep into that. But what I really want to encourage you is that I believe you are so worth the time and intention of just small things that help you cultivate a life well lived. Not so you can just be your best self in the sense that a lot of people talk about, but so that you can experience more of God and more of the life that He has given you. You are precious. He believes it. And the more we get to kind of experience Him, we believe it. And that also means we also believe more of how amazing our God is. If you have any questions, please let me know. Thank you again for joining me today. I'll talk to you guys next week. Take care.